NBA basketball fans, welcome back to the NBA Banter podcast, normally known as the NBA Playoff Banter podcast, but I don't think we have to get into the detail of why we haven't been calling that. But come sometime in August, it's going to be called that. Just a heads up, this will be our last basketball show for probably about 2 months, give or take. We'll be kind of sliding in there with a NBA playoff preview more than likely, or maybe just go right to the first round of the playoffs. July 31st is the start of the season. Of course, we did a show last Thursday talking about the NBA is back and all that good stuff. We got kind of further into the show, and we figured, you know what? If you have a top 74 list that you want to do some debating about, we probably don't want to do that at the back end of a podcast and make it an hour and a half or something like that. So we figured we'd save you guys a little bit. But that's basically, I'll start with a little bit of random NBA news. But other than that, we will just get right to this. And if you're wondering what list it is, it's the top 74 players of all time, according to, that's a key word there, according to ESPN. It's on ESPN. It starts with Artis Gilmore, actually. So we'll kind of break down. We're not going to go every I may mention players as we go, but we're not going to break down their career or whatever. But there are some notes and there's a few head scratchers that just make you shake your head. I do think there's some current players that may be too high, but it's kind of a projection where they could be. Maybe if it's even low, like Giannis might turn out to be better than where he's projected, but he still needs to do it for a while type thing. But we're going to definitely get into that in just a short little bit. But if this is your first time listening to the NBA Playoff Banter podcast, I might as well just call it that. It streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. It streams live at archives. But you don't have to go to Blog Talk and download the show off there or listen to it in the browser like a lot of people do. To find this show here talking NBA basketball, you can find it under the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast under Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Spreaker, Stitcher, really across the board. We're also part of the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network, which can be found everywhere, including Spotify. In fact, you can use your Siri or Alexa through Spotify or TuneIn to find the platform. Head on over to thegruelingtruth.com. It's basketball, it's football, it's baseball, it's boxing, it's everything in between. They got a great sponsor over there, betnow.eu, with the promo code TGT. And one more thing, if you're thinking about cutting the cord, or maybe you're not quite happy, I got something for you. I use it myself. It's called AT&T TV Now. It's live streaming cable. They have the 7-day free trial. The plans start as low as $55 a month. No annual contract. You can stream it anywhere. They have the cloud DVR. It's called AT&T TV Now. That's live streaming cable now. However, if your internet is just really, really bad, right, you can only say archive something on Netflix or something like that, but any kind of live streaming platform is going to be an issue. They do have the growing platform AT&T TV. That's your normal cable platform. Like I said, it is growing. It's not available everywhere. It is here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in New York, parts of Florida, parts of Texas, parts of California, all the way up to the Northwest, in Seattle, other places like St. Louis in the Midwest. Basically, just Google it, AT&T TV, put your area code in there, and see if it's available in your area. Otherwise, it's called AT&T TV Now live streaming cable. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host and see how he's doing on this fine summer day. What's going on, Marshall? How you doing?
Life is pretty good. The golf game has been improving, so that makes life a little bit better. I'm not quite sure why I play, because 9 out of 10 times whenever you finish playing golf, you're always pissed off about something. But nonetheless, the summer's off to a good start. Personally, again, the news continues to drag on, and it seems like now we're back to more coronavirus news again too. And I know the stock market has been going down, but We're here to talk sports and have fun. We were just talking before the show. I do like, everyone's got different opinions on social media now, but I do like it from one standpoint of it seems to be maybe calling people out who need to be called out and also showing lots of good stuff. So I know that, it's kind of a generic opinion, say, oh, social media is so bad nowadays and everything, and it ruins society. Well, in some aspects it does, but in some aspects it's doing a lot of good. And again, it's calling people out that need to be called out, and you're seeing, like people starting, hashtags for awesome stuff. So it's just interesting how like Twitter really for the past couple of months, Chris, is like just been like it's kind of like taking its own world. Like I kind of wake up every morning now and I'm like, okay, what's in the news now? And Twitter's got you updated, and it's kind of crazy. So and it's sad that we have to turn to that. I normally kind of bury my head in the sports world for better or worse, but since we can't quite do that still yet, it's like, all right, what's in the news today? And like we were also saying before the show, I like how all this stuff we're doing as a country, I think it's going to make us better in the long run. Not to get on a political story here, but like I think people are doing a lot of good stuff. So a year from now, we should look back and say, wow, last summer we did a lot of progressive stuff. So we should become a better place from that, and we can hopefully enjoy sports because we want to, because we're sport fans, and have a better country to live in as well.
Well, I just don't know which sports I'm going to be able to watch now because there's going to be protests before it. So I'm really screwed, you know what I mean? I can't turn my game on at, 12:03 and see the kickoff. I have to turn the TV on to see Kaepernick on a knee. I don't know why. I can't just turn it on. That's what's so funny about these fucking protests during sports. They're not even during the fucking game. So what's your fucking problem? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's going to be funny to see these people on their high horse of ignorance and racism being like, oh, I can't watch it. I just can't do it. I can't watch it. No more season tickets. Oh, you're such – but everybody else is a snowflake, right? We're the sheep and the snowflake, but yeah, you can't handle somebody going on down to a knee, even though a soldier is the one who told Cap to make that's a more respectful thing in the military to go down on one knee, sign of respect. But hey, who wants to even talk about facts? But you're right. Instead of this spring and early summer marred by this crazy lockdown coronavirus thing, and obviously it's marred by a lot of protest and businesses being burned and all sorts of negative stuff. Violence is bad, regardless of who's doing it. Of course, we know that. But when you look back, maybe we can actually – it can be something we look back at. This is like you said, the change, and it won't be stuck into what a weird spring coronavirus was, and it actually is going to be something much bigger than that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all turns out.
And again, you mentioned football. Again, I don't think Goodell cares. If you are a football fan, there's going to be a season. I just don't see any way where he's like, guys, I've talked to the health commissioners.
Right.
We're going to delay the season. No, there's going to be football. There might be teams with 30 people, but
they'll buy a country. They're going to buy a country
on Sunday.
We're actually not just an island. We're buying this country, and we're going to move all.
Yeah, he'll take the UFC Dana White route and get a football island.
Yep. I mean, shit, you might as well go to Hawaii. They got football fields there. They got a lot of players that come out of there now, so why not? Yeah, I agree. And they're talking about with fans and shit too,
Well, and I'm happy, Chris, because we're sport fans of all sports, but this is a basketball podcast, and I'm happy that basketball has agreed to everything. Because being a baseball fan, man, when I check Twitter for baseball, it doesn't seem to be going too hot. So for all the baseball fans listening to our podcast, I'm praying with you, man. I want to enjoy baseball this summer, and so many people in our country do. But every time you check the news on that, the president's like, oh, there's going to be a season this year. The owner of the it's like, well, then where are the players on that whole deal? That's a whole mess. We could do a podcast on that for an hour or two. But if you're a baseball fan, just look forward to basketball in a couple months because this baseball season ain't looking too likely.
Yeah, start liking golf or some shit or soccer or Korean baseball still on. Go for that because Yeah, it's a mess, dude. You can tell that they have the longest standing union and the longest standing
Oh yeah,
beef in the sports because
Bas-
holy shit, dude. Like this
basketball
is
is like Silver's like, here's an idea, and NBA players are like, yeah, we respect it. Let's go play
right.
ball. Okay, deal,
No,
bet.
it's unbelievable. Like you said, they've like, oh, we got it, it's here, and then no, and then it's just so much false reporting and so much bullshit, and then we hear like the MLB will come back to the union with a worse offer, and you're like, yeah, that's what we need right now. Oh, they're not gonna fucking agree to the offer you just gave, so you make it a worse offer. Yeah, that'll make it. Like, come on.
It's like an ugly divorce.
Seriously, millionaires arguing with billionaires, and it's like, oh, great, that's gonna lead real. That's exactly what the country needs to hear about right now. Jesus Christ. That's kind of Congress, though. If you think about it, millionaires arguing with billionaires, at least the top members of Congress.
True.
But yeah, too bad, baseball fans. I do think it'll come back, but geez, they better get their shit in gear here soon because they need to start opening these things up. But yeah, there is a little bit of news, actually, just about an hour and change ago. They're talking about just some dates and all that, and as far as when you arrive and how long the estimated time when you're going to be in Orlando and all that. And basically here, as the NBA firms up the 22-team Orlando restart schedule, 14 of the teams will be eliminated within 53 days of arriving, not when, playing. The actual season is 16 games, or 16 days for 8 games. And only 4 teams will remain after 67 days, sources say. The NBA players have been working to make clear the players that are actual committed. They're basically trying to really say, hey, they also are saying, hey, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I mean, you're not going to get paid, but you know what I mean? We're not going to force you to do it. The NBA is planning to begin the camps July 9th through the 11th, and teams will briefly quarantine before beginning the formal training camps prior to the regular season. This says July 30th in this. I wonder if that's a misprint or if that's a new date. I could have sworn it was 31st, but maybe I'm wrong. The 6 teams eliminated after regular season, the regular season games in a possible play-in tournament for the 8th seed would leave Orlando within 35 to 40 days. So the NBA expects the conference finals will end within a maximum of 82 days, leaving the 2 NBA finalists, just those 2, obviously. The league expects the NBA finals could start September 30th, and it sounds like mid-November if it's stretched to that. Would be. So they're just kind of getting it all mapped out. We are starting to see like players go through drills. Some states you're starting to see like some summer league randoms, not summer league NBA, but just some summer league stuff that like pickup / organized basketball with a crowd in the. You see like a crowd and people in the game, and you're like, well, what's going on, guys? I see about 50 people in that gym, and they're all sitting right next to each other. So it'll be a little interesting, but I think they are using this June to kind of get through, to kind of spread it in a weird way. Like, all right, you're sick. All right, well, let's get the sickness out this month. Let's get everybody out this month, and then when we report, July 9th or whatever it said, then they can, I think it's a really great idea. The way they're going about this. Anything that you'd like to say before we hop into this top 74 of all time list that ESPN made so we could argue?
Yes, only one basketball point, and I've been hearing different thoughts, and a lot of NBA players have been vocal on Twitter. But it's like, what do they do for the crowd noise? Because there was a recommendation. I don't know what the player was, but they're like, why don't you? Maybe they should I don't know what the correct use is, but like fill in crowd noise with like NBA 2K noises. And one of the players was like, are you effing serious?
Right.
So I know they don't want to have all the players. Obviously, you can't have like, mics and timeouts because you don't want to hear stuff, and there's gambling and all that. And you don't want to have a completely empty crowd either. But
you don't want to just hear sneakers either,
Yeah.
because you're going to
Yeah.
hear the shit out of those sneakers.
Any advice on what you do? I mean, I like the idea of kind of playing music. I know when you do watch an NBA game, they obviously do have like in-game music, but it normally has its moments on and off.
Right.
Maybe a full soundtrack during the game. Maybe the home team can pick music. I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I know that using the video game sounds would be kind of corny. I do think that having like you said, having it just be sneakers squeaking and hearing people drop F-bombs all the time isn't good either. Maybe a soundtrack. What's your 2 cents on that? I know it's kind of a hard thing to answer.
Yeah. I think because we hear the sneakers in Summer League, right? I mean, we do.
Sure. Yeah.
Until it's like, unless the Lakers are playing the Jazz or something, then it's like a full-on crowd, and then it's normal. But there's a lot of those games because they run them throughout the day, and this is what they're going to do with this 5-6 games a day maybe. It's like Christmas every day for the NBA. You know how they do run 5 games. You know what? There's a potential boxing event from Australia that might, Wilder Fury 3 might be in Australia and broadcast live on Christmas Day or Christmas night here. But that's another story, kind of random. But anyway, I would say to bring the DJ in like they do in the games and just do the DJ and let that play a little bit. You could probably bring it down a little bit because you're not going to have it fucking blaring because there's not going to be people talking. I mean, at a high level anyway, like the crowd.
Yeah.
So I would say bring the DJ in, let him do his normal thing. Maybe even don't – I don't know, because you know how, like, there's a live game and then it'll be like once you cross the court, like sometimes they do turn off they shut it off just for, like, the last 12 seconds of the shot clock sometimes,
Sure. Yeah.
So however you do it in the game, just bring down the actual music noise or the volume, and so I would go with that. I'd let the DJ come and just do a normal NBA game. I don't think you can do the defense chants and shit like that, because then when are you gonna do the defense chant? You can't do a home court.
Sure.
And maybe that's part of the home court actually. Remember we talked about home court last week? Maybe that's a home court where they go defense, in certain parts of the game, like a home DJ would. You know what I mean? So maybe that would be an advantage for the players because they got, I don't think it would be, but you know what I mean? At least there's something.
It's something.
But I would probably keep the music, but because I don't want to hear all these sneakers. I want to hear the cusses, but I think that they have a lot of sponsors, and it's different than running, a documentary where exactly what the sponsors are, whereas the NBA has a lot more wide-ranging fucking, sponsors. So, but yeah, like we said all along, the one advantage they have is KG's not in the league.
Yes. And there's obviously other people who do swear, but that man was known for a very limited, colorful vocabulary of words that would not be received nicely upon by many young children, parents of young children watching the games.
On every single shot, too. Like every single, and then if the whistle blows, you put a ball up, he's going to say, I'm going to get that shit out of here, and he's going to swap it, too. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing. He's a role model, just not on the court.
Well, with that said, speaking of, and he's actually on the list. He's not 74th. He's actually a lot lower. But as Chris said, there is
Let's not start there because that's going to really break. You're not going to like me if we got to start with the Dirk and KG stuff. So go ahead, start it off.
So,
Artis Gilmore, though. Artis Gilmore. Good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, the ESPN said they pulled a bunch of writers or panels, expert panels voted on thousands of head-to-head matchups, taking into consideration both total career value and peak performance. Obviously, that makes it subjective. Obviously, people are. I'm sure if we interviewed 100 people, we would all have different thoughts because we're fans of people, we're not fans of people. Chris and I could disagree, so could Jazz fans, Suns fans, and Timberwolves fans. It always changes. But nonetheless, there's a top 74 list of NBA players of all time. I would say probably it's just scrolling through it. It seemed about like 40% of the 74 are current players, or maybe 30. So there's definitely some players still playing.
Or just a couple of years removed,
Yeah. So, and then you have players who, if you're my age at 35, you've probably maybe heard the name but didn't see them play, or caught like the very end of their careers. So like Kurt said, we're not going to go through the whole thing just because that would be forever. But we can do the names quickly. So 74 is Artis Gilmore. Obviously didn't see him play. And then you got a couple of bigs. You got Dikembe Mutombo. Most people know him for the finger wag at 73 whenever you block shots.
No.
I am happy that Damian Lillard is 72. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's not. But if you've ever watched Lillard play, he's one of the best guards in current basketball. And the way the sport's transformed in the past 10 years, if you're one of the best in the game at shooting, I don't think it's ridiculous to put you on there. Maybe he could have been a couple spots higher or lower. Who knows? But
and he can rap.
Yeah, Lillard making the list is just, I think, maybe a sign that the dude's had a lot of clutch moments in the playoffs and is a really good scorer. So Lillard's at 72. Bob Lanier is a name that was before me from Detroit. And then we got Tony Parker at 70. Obviously, Parker, if you're a basketball fan, he carried the Spurs for a long time, was a guard that helped them win a lot of rings. He played there from 2001 to 2018. Bernard King at 69. Pete Maravich is a name you've always heard of. I never saw the guy play, but he was a very talented guard from back in the day. Played for the Hawks, Jazz, and Celtics.
King is a little high. I would definitely put Bernard King lower on this list.
Sure. And Pete Maravich played for the New Orleans Jazz and Utah Jazz. So if you've ever seen the movie Basketball,
yeah,
at the start of the movie, we're like, and then they moved to and then New Orleans Jazz moved to Utah where they do not allow jazz. Oh, that's such a great movie. I'll get down to 60. I'll throw it to my co-host Chris. Alex English at 67. Can't say I know a whole lot about him, to be honest.
Put the English on the ball.
Dave Cowens at 66 was a Celtic and Buck. Can't say I know anything about him. Pau Gasol at 65. If you ask people for the past 5-6 years, his brother Mark has been.
He's a better player.
Marc Gasol at Memphis with Conley had a really, really good 6-7 year run. So that would be a name where I'd be like, if your brother's better than you, are you on the list just because you were playing with Kobe for a while and you were kind of as big? So maybe they should have swapped the brothers out.
Damn good player. And I remember him, before he went to Memphis even. Damn good player. But just not, it shouldn't be there.
No, hell, I would put Lillard over him. I know I'm biased towards Lillard, but I would say Lillard's done more for his team. But anyways, Earl Monroe at 64, I remember that name. He was a Baltimore Bullet and a Knick.
Earl the Pearl.
Alonzo Mourning for the Heat at 63. Obviously, the dude was a good center for a long time. I remember constant battles with the Knicks in the playoffs. Yeah. He was Riley's guy.
They got him going against Oak Tree right in that picture too.
I know that's a great picture. So again, I would say he deserves to make the list. He was always pretty highly regarded during the 90s as a respectable center. I think that's a respectable spot to put him at. Rodman at 62. I guess my first little opinion here, maybe could have been a little bit of a lower number, just because the guy was arguably one of the best rebounders of all time. Now I know it shows he only had 7 points a game, but his goal wasn't to score points. He had Jordan and Pippen and fellow guys in Detroit or San Antonio.
And he scored more in Detroit too, by the way, when he was younger.
You're right. He actually had a little bit of an arsenal of offensive game to himself, but realized, hey, I can be a hell of a role player and be a defensive dog. Like that was his role. And so maybe you could move Rodman down into the 50s, I would say. Now, obviously, you can't put him probably much lower than the 50s because he did not have an offensive game. But, again, he had a couple of playoff games where he had no points and 20 boards. And he had like 7 of those games.
Seven of
that
those, yeah, that's
documentary.
right, yeah. Because wasn't it Marcus Camby was the only one that got 2 or something
and
like that?
And he had 2. Yeah. So I probably would have voted Rodman down a little bit lower.
Yeah. Because and this is what we mean by basketball player. You put him on the court with 5 guys, he's going to fucking do a lot for you.
Yes. And that's why, again, this list can be subjective. If you're an offensive savvy stats guy, like I love James Harden, okay, well, I could see you putting Rodman further up. But if you're looking for a basketball player, as you said, Chris, Rodman could probably be a lot lower if we're looking for a 5-tool guy. My last 2 for 60s are Robert Parrish and Willis Reed. Obviously, I've heard of the name Parrish as a Celtic. He was there. Let's see. He was a Warrior, a Celtic, a Hornet, and a Bull. He averaged 14 points his career, 9 boards. So respectable career. Many know him as a Celtic. And Willis Reed was a New York Knick. Only played for them for 10 years. Another name I've heard about. I never watched him play because I wasn't alive at that time. But
he had that Game 7 where he came out of the locker room and they ended up winning because he pumped up the squad.
Yes, sir. Well, that is my 60. I can't say it's too eventful because we're not into debate yet. I don't know half the guys, but we've gone through 14, Chris. It's your turn, my friend.
So Paul Gasol, I think he's solid. And was it Vancouver? It was Vancouver that went to Memphis.
Yes,
Vancouver
100%.
Grizzlies. Yep.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I remember, and that's why I said before he went to Memphis, and I looked at it, said Memphis. I was like, oh no, he was there. I could have sworn he was in a different uni. So I think and maybe I'm also thinking of Sharif Rahim because he played for Vancouver too, and maybe he was there a couple years before that. God, I can't remember, but he shouldn't be on the list. I think he's a damn good player, but I just don't think he should be on the list, like you said. That's kind of the biggest one. And then I would probably put Rodman down, but I think you could also, make an argument for some of these other guys too. Bob McAdoo, had a lot of ABA with the Buffalo Braves, it said. He's just a solid player, just an all-around player. A lot of people, a lot of people like it. In fact, that 3-year stretch, only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was more valuable if you look at some of the numbers. So you could maybe even put him down. Ginobili, this one's interesting because Ginobili is also a guy you put him on the court with where he was with the right team, and he's a stallion. He's an MVP type guy. He could give you 6-man or he could start. And that one, I realize why people wouldn't want him in the top 60. I get some of that, and he probably isn't in the top 60. Maybe he's a little higher, but he was, if you watch the actual games, and he played for 16 years, the guy hit a lot of clutch shots. They wouldn't have won championships. And, even Parker in him, the biggest thing about the Spurs is, Marshall, they never went back-to-back. Remember, it was like 03, 05, 07. They never went back-to-back. And a lot of the reason why is because either Ginobili or Parker were hurt. And just one of them, you know what I mean? And once one went down, they couldn't win the championship. So that's really showing value. What do you think about Parker? How about this, Parker or Ginobili? I think that's kind of interesting.
I was just going to say, I think that both are very similar players. Ginobili was maybe one of the best 6 men of all time. Stat wise, they're probably similar. I'm sure, Parker's a little more offensive. That's actually a hell of a debate. I don't know. It is interesting. Yeah. I personally don't recall. I'm not sure who was a much better defender. I know that if they played for Popovich, both of them were respectable.
Both of them were damn good.
Yeah, neither was a joke. So maybe
I'd probably put Parker because he held the ball more. He's the point guard. I probably would actually.
Yeah, both these guys were super talented, and Parker was known for being a great passer, but could also get you a bucket like easily. And Ginobili was maybe a little more of a little more of a catch and shoot and drive guy. That's actually I think you could flip those, Chris, and it wouldn't make a big difference either. I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
And he popularized the Euro step. He didn't do it first, but he did it in a way that you're like, oh, NBA players are gonna have to start to learn to do that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what he did there. Clyde Drexler at 57. It's weird to look and say, okay, Clyde Drexler, Ginobili. Oh, wait a second. What are we talking about here? But, Clyde was number one on his team until he got to Houston. So some of the scoring was off of that as well. Whereas Ginobili was the number one. Maybe he'd score more, or he would score more too. Ray Allen at 56 is a solid-ass player. Damn good player. Definitely first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't have him in the top 60, though. I think I'm not really lining that up. Vince Carter at 55, I actually would say the same thing. I don't agree with him in the top 60. Paul Pierce, because of Ray Allen did a lot of stuff. But he obviously one of the best, top 5 shooter all time, Ray Allen, for sure. But Paul Pierce had that mid-range game, too. And he could also just take over a game and call it, too. Like, hey, I'm not only going to hit the shot, but I'm going to call it, too. And whenever you have KG saying, well, like that him and LeBron went off for like 40 apiece, somewhere in there. They both had 40 in that closeout game back in the day. I think during that run, that championship run. Oh, no, yeah, it was a championship run, I think. But, even KG, in Game 7, he was like, well, the game plan today, once we saw Pierce hanging up or heating up, was exactly what other people said about Jordan and other guys. Just give Paul the ball and get the fuck out of his way. Set the screen and let him do it. So I'm out of the guys that I mentioned before this, Vince Carter, Ray Allen. If anybody deserves it, I think Paul Pierce deserves to be in this range.
Yeah, and that pains me because I actually bought a Vince Carter Heels jersey like a month ago, and I loved it. Oh, it's a beautiful baby blue jersey. But, Vince Carter's more just like the dude played in 4 different decades and was maybe the best dunker of all time and was a hell of a player. But, again, Paul Pierce was a more accomplished overall scoring threat. Vince could just jump out the gym and could always be a great scorer when needed to be, but he was never quite, I would say, quite the leader and player that Paul Pierce was. I agree with that statement as much as I, hate to ever say a bad word about any Heels. And actually the list of stars in the 50s continues because it's also Gary Payton at 53. I mean, that dude, one of the best defense. I remember us doing our podcast about the Jordan documentary. I remember saying like how good, and I realized this too because I knew the name, but one of the best defenders of all time, Chris. This is actually, if you put these guys in the 50s on a team, you'd have a pretty good squad, man.
No kidding. Definitely. He'd definitely do it. And the glove, like he's money. McGrady, 52, I'm okay with that because of, one, he did put in some time. It wasn't like he got hurt. Like, it wasn't like it was Penny Hardaway or something like that, where he got hurt too early in his career. McGrady, I can't put him higher than this, but he had the potential to be. Let's put it this way. When we're going to bring up Giannis and some other current players who aren't quite, they're not 10 years in or 8 years in, McGrady, after a chunk of years, you'd have him higher on the list, in my opinion. If we were going to do the list, you know what I mean, to kind of correlate it to that, you would have him much higher, but you can't because of the injuries. So I'm okay with McGrady there, no doubt about it. Big game James Worthy, another Kakalaka guy. I like that, 51. Wes Unseld, another guy I didn't see, but I always heard about it. Baltimore Bullets, Capital Bullets, and then obviously Washington Bullets. So he was all about the Washington area and Baltimore area, and just the DC, DMV, that whole area. So didn't ever see him play besides highlights, but he was definitely a guy that a lot of younger players looked up to. Reggie Miller at 49. This one's interesting. because he's such a clutch player, top 5 shooter of all time. Obviously showed when he had a team around him, he could go right there with Jordan. He could get all up in his grill. He could fight him and all that, right? He obviously scored all those points in a very short amount of time, and he was the king of, he's a nice guy, and he's got the good image, but he's going to talk shit to you all day. I don't mind being at 49, but I did hear some people thought he should be much higher. I'm okay if we're talking about some of these guys we've mentioned in the last 8 to 10 spots.
Just so we're on the same page for the rest of this, when you say higher, do you mean the numbers and he should have been in the 50s or he should have been like in the 30s? Like
that's
higher
a good thing. So I'm going to say, I think I started by saying lower, but so lower would be actually lower, not lower on the list, but lower number. So ranks higher on the list, just so maybe it makes more sense to everybody. Higher would be, I want Reggie. He's 49? I want Reggie 36. We'll say higher.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, just for
that's a good call.
I was thinking the same thing about that. Put him higher too, so better in the rankings. Just because he was, like you said, I'm going to repeat you, but a super clutch player that was he was basically like Steph Curry and Clay before they've been around. He was the Steph Curry to like this younger fans generation. And yeah, he was just a hell of a 3-point shooter. I'm with you. I was thinking maybe lower 40s and high 30s. Again, and he wasn't the shitty defender that Harden was either. So I don't know his defensive stats, but he wasn't a joke on the defensive end, like some of the guards are nowadays. So I'm with you, Chris. I think he could have been a little bit higher on the list. Bill Walton at 48, I always just think of his random ass Pac-12 comments that when the point guard dribbled out of court and he's like, you know what? I always forget his partner. And God bless that partner. He's like, you know what? Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon at 4 p.m. on a November night? Well, what do you think about that? And they're like, and he hits a 3. It's like, dude, what are we talking about the Grand Canyon for a November day when a guy just jacked a 3, But I know obviously he was good as a player. He averaged
injuries, It was all like it says right here, what ifs. He's one of the ultimate what ifs because he's one of the best college players of all time, hands down. But yes, it's a what if. It is a what if because of injuries, unfortunately. He played for the San Diego Clippers too, just so you know.
Kind of like the Greg Oden too, unfortunately for Portland. They've had a couple of bad lucks with bigs. 47, you have George Gervin, who, again, I for sure have heard that name thousands of times. The Iceman, I obviously never saw him play, but he averaged 25 points a game. So no matter what era you were in,
right,
you're a respectable player. Now, maybe if you were a fan of his, you could argue that he should be higher on this list. Again, it's hard for me to say because I never saw him, but not many people on this whole list average 25. So if you were to make an argument for him just off the stats, I could see people presenting that case.
You're kind of covering up your mic a little bit.
Oh, okay. Number 46, Dominique Wilkins, obviously a very talented dunker, as I mentioned, just up there with Vince Carter. It's actually kind of fitting they show a picture of him dunking the ball. I briefly remember watching him. Obviously, he was a very talented player for Atlanta. I went through, if I remember, a couple of years where they weren't exactly a talented team, and he kind of bounced around a little bit later. But again, he also averaged 24.8 points a game and was a guy that could jump out the gym. They put him as a human highlight film. So him and Vince were both definitely, Chris, two people who were just always fun to watch. Just, the game might suck, but you could expect a dunk from Dominique that would make everyone stand up on their feet.
Yeah, and he also ran into the Celtics, ran into the Pistons, and also even the Bucks, like it says here at the end. But people, like I said, fans won't forget his duel with Bird in Game 7 Eastern Conference Semis. And that is, I think people forget because he's one of those guys because he didn't go to the finals and he wasn't in there every other year that he does get a little underrated. But, man, this guy, I felt bad for the rim and the ball and even the net in the backboard. Like the stress that he was putting them on. I mean, we talk about like double pumps and windmills. This mother effer could bring it almost down to his ankles and dunk it, dude.
Then you got Anthony Davis at 45. I think that's a little interesting. I mean, obviously he's in the list, but I
It's
guess
a
I'm not
perfect
quite
example of what we talked about.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not.
He just needs to do this for like 3 to 5 more years, or probably 5 more years, right? And he'll be on this list and be here. I just don't know if I'd put him here yet. It's a little iffy.
Yeah, because he definitely has had a list of issues with injuries. I remember it kind of you don't really expect it, but he actually had missed a good chunk of games when he was a New Orleans, I want to say Pelican or a Hornet. But I mean, definitely the potential is there. He's one of the most tallest, versatile players of NBA history, and his numbers show it. I mean, he's going to have some of the best numbers of all time. It's just hard to put him above some names we've just mentioned. And again, he's probably more athletic than a lot of them, but his longevity is
it's projecting. It's projecting.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like to me.
You're right. Elvin Hayes at 44. He played mainly in the 70s, so I can't say I know much about him. I've heard the name.
You were a big fan of the San Diego Rockets, though. I know that.
Oh well, yeah. I got a couple of hats in my dresser. Rick Barry was a Warrior, also a man that shot underhand free throws. Again, averaged 24.8 points a game. Dude, and a lot of NBA players actually should do it. They just don't want to take the ridicule and embarrassment for it, but it would certainly help a lot of bigs if they were to do it.
Even if it's 10%, 15, 12% better, like that'd be fucking huge, Think about how many more buckets that is a night.
Oh,
that's a lot.
All right, so I'm gonna now one of my points here, 42 for Westbrook. Obviously, the article about him is written by Royce Young, who is the ESPN coverage man for OKC. The stats show it.
Mr. Triple-double.
They do.
My biggest case is he's been in the league since 2008. So he's a lot more established than someone 5 or 7 years who's been injured. I guess that's my thing with him. I accept him on the list more than I do some of these other youngsters.
Oh, I accept him on the list. I think maybe he's a little bit too high for me.
Sure.
Just because he's a guy that's been pretty much, and again, you deserve to give him some credit because it's incredibly hard to score in the NBA. The rumors of, they don't play defense is stupid. It's just the really elite guys score. But he's kind of been a ball hog. I mean, he does get his numbers, but, to what extent? And, I mean, with him and Durant, I don't know. He's also one of the worst three-point shooters in NBA history. So that always has stuck out to me. Now, again, you can say, well, who gives a shit? But
I mean, he shot it better than Jordan. No, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Should he be on the list 100%? Is he fun and exciting, athletic? Yes. Should he be 42?
Could he take Bob Cousy off the dribble and guard him and shut him down all night? Yes, but that's a different league, different time. No, I hear you.
Yeah,
it's debatable.
I just think it's a lot, and again, and look at the end of it. Just we just went through Anthony Davis. Is Anthony Davis a lesser ball player than Brick? I mean, Westbrook. That could probably be a debate. So I don't know, but I won't hold this forever. I just think that's a little bit too high, but that's probably. I've just never been a Westbrook guy, but so be it. He does score all the time, and when he averages triple-double, it's just at the cost of what he does it for. But anyways, Bob Cousy, obviously didn't see him play, but I've, again, always been a name I've heard, was a hell of a point guard for all I know. Played from 50 to 70, so the dude had a 20-year career. They have an award named after him. Like, you had a pretty damn good run if your name is always mentioned in the history of basketball, Chris.
Yeah, and him and Russell won a lot of championships together. So yeah, he was definitely like a concrete part of that team. So what about Chris Paul? Now obviously he's been in the league a lot. He deserves to be on the list. He's been in the league since 2005, so he's gone through his career basically. He's obviously on the downside, has been for a little bit. Well, let's go Westbrook to him. Who do you think should be higher on the list? They both could be lower on the list as far as, but as far as who would you put before each other?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Chris Paul is a better defensive player. Not that Westbrook is a joke on defense, but Chris Paul is obviously more talented. And I guess it just depends on, Chris Paul is a guy that's going to orchestrate and lead an offense, and Westbrook's going to kind of want to be the offense. So, again, if we're talking
plus, you can't untuck your jersey next to Chris Paul. So
bastard. So I mean, for 5-tool players, I would go Paul, better defensive player, Paul, better 3-point shooter, probably Paul. I mean, but for beating up people off that they're pretty close. I would say that they're pretty close players. Maybe I would just lean towards Chris Paul because he's a little more well-rounded.
Yeah, below the rim.
Push.
He's below the rim,
Yeah.
Walt Frazier, definitely a stud. Deserves to be right in there. Bob Pettit, that's another guy that this is way back in the day. Milwaukee Hawks, St. Louis Hawks, 19 foot. The guy he barely played actually. Oh no, I've read that wrong. So I mean, he deserves to be on the list. I'm not going to sit there and debate where. Patrick Ewing at 37, that'll be kind of an interesting one. Kevin McHale and him. McHale had more moves, but I'd say Ewing was a better defender. That could be flip-flopped in there. Jason Kidd, 35, and this is where it gets really interesting. What do you think about Ewing to McHale? Because they used to call McHale 31 flavors, like Baskin Robbins, because he had so many post moves.
Again, I loved watching Ewing because I was a Knicks fan growing up, so I'm going to be a little more biased. Obviously, I didn't see McHale play. So I think they're probably in the right spots. I do think those were two Hall of Fame guys who should be on the list, and they were, top-tier centers for their time. I would just lean Patrick just because I was a fan for the guy and never saw McHale, but I think they're both probably in the right spots they should be, and two guys that definitely were, I think they located them right on this one, Chris.
This is where I start to have some fucking problems, okay? Jason Kidd. Very underrated player. You can go ahead and look at that 12.6 points per game. That's fine. Mr. Triple-double with defense before Westbrook and a couple other of these guys. Just a stud player. Carried Martin and Van Horn and Kittles and stuff like that to the finals back-to-back years, I think it was. Started hitting threes late in his career and became the second best player on that Dallas club that won a championship. I mean, for a guy that couldn't shoot the three for a while, he ended up 10th all time in make threes. And that was always a sticking point to him. Oh, I don't know, he can't shoot. Are you sure? You sure he can't shoot? Because the guy's got 10th all-time threes. I know some of that's longevity, but when you look at his assists and steals, only Stockton's got him there. So we'll keep going here, though. It's not that I'm, worried about where Kidd is. You could maybe even move Kidd lower on the list. I'm not saying that. It's who's in front of Jason Kidd who really starts to steam me. George Mikanum, you got to put him on the list. He built the house that built, the Armory here in Minneapolis. Know that all those Laker titles aren't all in LA. There's 4 or 5 of them here in Minneapolis. When they had that throwback jersey, that MPLS, that stands for Minneapolis. Okay, we got the Lakes up here, Laker fans. Just so you know, you got to put him on the list. I don't care what era he played in. Havlicek steals the ball. He's on the list just because he's an all-purpose player. Hondo, I didn't know they called him Hondo. This is perfect. I was going to say this, Manu Ginobili, and it says it right here in the text. I mean, just an all-purpose guy, just a hell of a defender. From what I remember seeing and reading and learning about that type of thing. James Harden at 32. We're going to keep going a little bit, get here. Isiah Thomas at 31. And then Steve Nash at 30. So this is where I'm going to freak out a little bit. So Steve Nash, I don't think he should have been 2-time all MVP. I think from an offensive standpoint, the guy could shoot. He could get off the dribble. He was crafty with this layup. It took him a while to develop, kind of like Kidd actually, and then he blew up. Damn good player. Couldn't play defense. Hustled, yeah, but the reason why they never won is because Stoudemire and Nash couldn't play defense at a high level. That's why they couldn't get by the Spurs and whatnot. I love me some Steve Nash. Don't get me wrong. He controlled the tempo and all that. But Jason Kidd's a better player. And Isiah Thomas at number 31 is just freaking ridiculous. This guy is a stud. Most people that didn't like him in the documentary we saw, he beat him in the playoffs. Kind of weird. Don't get me wrong. As a GM and, all that other stuff, not good at all. But either was Jordan. I don't know what world we're living in when Nash is above. I don't care if it's 1 slot or 10 slots. But Nash being above Kidd, and then Isiah, who even Jordan hates him and puts him as the second best all time. I can't. This is where. What are we talking about? Are we talking about offensive efficiency? Because other than that, I just can't. And you know what? As a point guard, he was a stud too, by the way. And he played in a much more gritty era. Try to put Nash in the 80s and 90s. He'll be hurt halfway through the season, dude. Isiah can get off the dribble. People forget about him getting off the dribble and what he could do with a low dribble. It's asinine and just made up so we could argue about it.
Yeah, I didn't see Isiah play maybe a little bit, but from what I learned in the documentary, and it was like one of the 6 compliments Jordan gave on the whole damn show.
Exactly.
Literally.
If Jordan said something good, then he's damn good.
And Jordan didn't even say he didn't like the guy. And there's rumors that he didn't want him on the dream team, but he said he's the second best of all time. Yeah, I'm sorry. Him near Harden is abysmal to me. Again, now we're really talking about offensive talented players because Harden has been known for shit defense, and it's gotten a little bit better, but
right.
He is a bad defender. And
yes.
I'm going to bring up a player later near the end, but again, if we're going to throw in Harden's name, I don't know at that spot. Like, is Harden truly like 34 spots above Lillard? I mean, just if we're talking scorers can score, like the numbers might be a little bit more, but like Lillard's had like McCollum with him. Harden's done. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. And hell, Lillard's not a good defender either.
Well, he's gotten further though too. In the playoffs and been the number one guy on the team. But yeah, I hear you.
You're right.
I hear you.
But I mean, if we're just talking scoring, I mean,
right.
I don't think
this
they're
is NBA player all time.
Yeah. So Harden's just his number's way too high for me. And you compare him to Lillard, again, biased, but it's just ridiculous. And he doesn't play defense. And Isiah did. And Nash, again, didn't play defense either. And he had a very, very awesome offense. But again, it's not in the same ballpark. And then, this is such an interesting stretch because at 29,
Iverson.
You want to talk about a gritty ass dude? I mean, he's probably my favorite out of all these people. I would take him 100 times over 100 before I even touched Harden. I mean, the dude's a 6-foot point guard, and he didn't give a shit. He led his team to the damn finals. So
look at the picture they got him going amongst the trees right in there.
I know that. So I'm not sure if him and Isiah should be higher on the list. But you want to talk about gritty people? Maybe they both. Those guys. I mean, I don't care about Nash and everything, but AI was a hell of a basketball player. Always put up numbers. Never cared. Was a small guy. Always got beat up. Never cared. Has done tons of charity work all the time for it seems in the news. So it just seems a good person. That probably was, I don't know, maybe some media bias. I'm not sure, but whatever. AI is at 29, hell of a ball player. Stockton too. Again, maybe
I got to say over Stockton.
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Stockton's awesome. He was Mr. Assist, no problem, no doubt about it. What they say, 9 consecutive years he led the league in assists. That's awesome.
Again, I don't even know. I'm just going to keep moving because we could debate those 5 guys in a row. I just know Harden's my 5th. But Stockton, yeah, hell of a passer, as you said.
And here's the projection right here, number 27.
Yeah, Antetokounmpo, the Greek Freak. He could probably get closer towards top 15.
Yeah,
easily, just because he has all the tools in the world, and many consider him right now to be the most
he could be top 10 potentially.
Young player in the game right now. He's not quite LeBron, and he doesn't have a trophy like Kawhi, but all of his skills are there to be a hell of a ball player, and I hope that continues to be the case. And I hope he stays in Milwaukee because the sport needs that. D Wade.
Fuck Milwaukee. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. It's a border state. I can't have that blasphemy on my podcast. Sorry.
I mean, D Wade is. I'm not quite sure. Like, the dude was a hell of a vet forever. Was a very, very good player. Not quite Jordan, LeBron, but was he maybe the best way to describe him was he was a Pippen. Is that fair? Like, I mean, he was kind of a Pippen.
Well, he got to prove himself as a non-Pippen, though. But then again, that was with Shaq, though. You put Pippen and Shaq together, I think good things are going to happen.
I guess, I don't know, what do you think he's in the right spot, Chris?
I'm okay.
He definitely needs to be there.
Yeah, he definitely needs to be there. There's a lot of debate to be had. He could be higher on the list. He could be notched back a little bit. I'd take Isiah over him, but I'm okay with it.
And speaking of Kawhi, who I just said, I'll put him at 25. The dude has a ring. He's been a couple of rings, a couple of final
9 years. Had to guard LeBron. Yeah.
A silent killer. Okay. We got David Robinson at 24. I don't think there's any people debating much about him being on the list. If you're a Spurs fan, I'm sure you probably want to be a little bit higher, but very, very steady center, incredible with blocks, incredible with rebounds, had a great run with Duncan. 24, I'm good with that. Barkley at 23. Again, if you're a Suns fan, you're probably saying, put him a little bit higher. A lot of people thought during his time, him and Jordan were, I'm not saying he was Jordan, but he was definitely one of the players right under Jordan. So if you were really comparable to Jordan, maybe you should be a couple notches higher. Chris, I know you saw Barkley more. Do you think he's you think his number should be a little bit better than 23, my friend?
I'm okay with where he's at. If someone said I want him a little higher in the top 20, I'm not going to argue. He wasn't a great defender, and also his discipline wasn't phenomenal. Let's put it that way. While people were eating, salads and veggies, he was eating pizza. You know what I mean? So I think maybe that plays into it. But I'm okay where he's at, and I think it's a legit argument to say he should be higher in the list. He's one of the best on his size. Well, the best 6'5" or whatever rebounder, I'd say. Maybe I'd say he's the best that height. I was going to say Oscar Robertson, but I think he's a better rebounder than him, though. But yeah, I'm okay with where it is, and if people say, a little bit more up, I'm not going to complain.
All right, well, we'll keep moving because I know this top 10 is going to get debatable. Elgin Baylor at 22, a hell of a basketball player. Again, I've heard the name, and the dude played long time ago. And he was for the Lakers in Minneapolis and L.A.
Yes, sir.
It was just a hell of a scorer. Averaged 27 points a game in his career. Scottie Pippen at 21. I mean, that just, I'd say that's almost a perfect spot. And he probably could have been maybe even a little bit higher if he'd had his own coattails to ride. But if he wasn't on his own ship, he probably doesn't have 6 rings to count for either. So
sure.
I think that's a great spot. All right, 20, your boy KG. I think he's definitely, he needs to have a low number. He was one of the best power forward scorers of all time. I'm going to guess you're going to want your boy a little bit higher.
Well, hold on. You said scorer at the end. I don't like that classification.
Well,
one of the top scorers. Yeah, he's a scorer, but don't put him just in a scorer.
No, but would you say he's one of the okay? But I think I said one of the best power forward scorers of all time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just he's such a defender, able to guard all 5 positions, so it's hard to just call him a scorer. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just getting defensive. Go ahead.
No. KG is definitely top 20. As you said, guarded every position. I remember going to games where he was literally the point guard, and there's not many guys who could be a point guard and guard all 5 positions. And his little 13-foot step back little jumper right above the elbow is one of the most pretty shots in basketball.
Definitely. Dirk is 19, and there's nobody on the planet that can argue that Dirk is a better player than KG. Basketball player, we're talking about. And not only that, but just go look at the talent. Go look at from, mid to late 90s to early 2000s, Dallas against, Minnesota going against, Sacramento with Weber and all that talent, Duncan and all that talent, Rasheed Wallace and all that talent. I mean, Dirk always had talent around him, better talent. I'm not going to say, he should have won more championships. I'm not saying that at all. Dirk's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think he's a top 20 player of all time. He was a guy that got into it and then peaked a little later, but notice he peaked when a lot of guys started fading. Duncan, Garnett, Wallace, he peaked when those guys faded. And I'm not ripping him. First ballot Hall of Famer, hell of a player. But there's no way you can say, I don't think he's a top 20 player of all time. I think he's the best Euro player of all time, but I don't think he's the best. I just can't do it. But yeah, to have him in front of KG is just a slap in the face.
And then we'll kind of cruise through these to get to the top 10. 18, Moses Malone, definitely deserved. I've heard that name hundreds of times. Karl Malone as well for the Jazz. Him and Stockton were a hell of a duo. Malone is also one of the up there. I mean, I would put him behind KG and Dirk, but one of the best actually his numbers might be better, but one of the best big scorers of all time. You could argue that KG and Dirk were better scorers in your own opinion, but from a number standpoint, Malone filled up the scoreboard, so he definitely should. Man. Yeah, he's up there. Jerry West has the trophy named after him. A hell of a player. He's special.
He's a perfect example of you can't judge someone how many championships they won. This guy's is the logo of the league, and he just was not on the better team. That's why he kept getting beat.
Mm-hmm. Dr. J, I mean, I'm just going to say he probably is where he should be. If everyone knows him, his numbers are incredible. He was one of the best players to ever be a Philadelphia 76er. Incredible dunker, incredible athlete. KD, I can't quite go there with him. I mean,
so where would you put him?
I would put him.
Is he top 20?
I'd put him a couple of spots lower, yeah.
Okay, but he's still top 20.
I would put him more in 19-20 range, because the dude's a hell of a scorer. But I'm biased against him. I don't think he's honestly a great defender.
He got better, but you're right.
I would put him more, the 19-20 range. My boy Curry. Now, if I'm going to be fair is fair, Curry's not a great defender either. He's one of the best three-point shooters of all time. That probably puts him at the spot where he is. But again, if I'm going to rip on defense, he's had his moments too. He just happens to be a guy that has evolutionized the game and become a hell of a three-point shooter. So Curry is at 13.
That's too high. I put Durant's a better player than him. And I just think Curry's a damn good player, but I wouldn't put him at 13. Isiah Thomas is a better player than Steph Curry. I hate to say it for all these, to you, but also to all the newbies somewhat. In the last 10 years, you're not a newbie. But Isiah Thomas is better than Curry. Go ahead.
Hakeem the Dream at 12. I think that's perfectly fair. He's one of the best centers of all time. Won a couple of rings when Jordan was playing ball. And he was just steady. He was a hell of a player. And Oscar Robinson, probably in the right spot. He was a hell of a Cincinnati Royal.
Mr. Triple-Double, too. I mean, he is the Mr. Triple-Double before any of these triple-double dudes came along. He's
Yes.
Mr. Triple-Double.
Absolutely. And now to have a little bit of fun, let's do the top 10, my friend.
I mean, let's go. Shaq, Kobe. Shaq's 10th, Kobe's 9th. I kind of have a problem with that right off the bat. That's a tough one, though.
What does your gut say?
I say, God, it's tough. But, man, prime for prime, once he got all his moves down after getting schooled by Olajuwon, I mean, Kobe still had to dribble the ball and get it in. He couldn't go to the rack every time, whereas you're so close to the rim as a big. The amount of attention you'd have to do with Shaq, I would put Shaq over Kobe, but I'm okay. I'm okay with it. It's not something I want to debate all day or nothing like that. But I'm sure people are freaking out over Kobe being 9th, I'll tell you that. Because some people think Kobe's better than LeBron, which RIP, he's not.
Yeah, and that is the one thing that kind of jumped out to me is that you've always heard the bar chats or work chats or whatever about LeBron and Kobe, LeBron and Jordan. Well, hell, Kobe's 9th on the list. So, like I would have thought he would have been 3 or 4. And the fact that another Lakers that far in front of him is interesting. But, from your standpoint, to wrap this one up, because we could do this one forever, Shaq was the most powerful center of all time. So if we're going, by like there's a reason Curry's 13 because he's a 3-point shooter. Like if we're talking just stats and Harden, like hell, Shaq.
Yeah, there's a reason why these point guards were in the teens and 20s.
Yeah, hell, Shaq could probably be top 3 if we're doing that based on their position power.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tear your ass up tonight. Look at some of those numbers that he gobbled up. Those 30 and 15 games, 30 and 20 games, and I mean, like I said, when he was in his prime, I mean, you had to throw 3 guys at him. He took a beating,
So, again, if we're going off numbers, I would put Shaq a lot higher. Kobe.
And he played a lot of his prime was in the zone.
Yeah.
If he played in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't double him until he got the ball. Imagine that you couldn't run someone up. You got to stay one-on-one with Shaq until he gets the ball. Think about that shit.
Not fun.
Good luck. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we would both probably put Shaq higher. The Kobe debate was one that could go on forever. But then you have Duncan. I mean, you could debate for a lot of time who's better, Duncan or Shaq. Obviously, they were different types of players, but again, I don't think there's any debate that they both should be in the top 10. Duncan was as steady as it gets. Like you could use about every nice adjective in the sport to describe him. And for all we know, he's a hell of a player for the sport. Never saw bad news, represented a great teammate for Popovich. Duncan definitely needs to be a top 10 guy. 7 with Bird. Obviously,
once again, talent-wise, if you put a Malone or you put a KG in his spot, if you put KG with Robinson right away, could they be the same player? I think so, but I'm not going to argue this because Duncan has that many more rings.
It's hard. I don't know. This top 10, they did do a pretty good job on this.
The rest, a lot of the rankings suck, but this last chunk has been pretty damn
good. Bird at 7. You know this a little bit better than me. You content with him at 7?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Yeah, because once you start looking what's in front of me, you're like, okay. I think Magic was better than Larry, so just because of the all-purpose. And, when they needed him when Kareem was out, he played center and had a monster game and won the championship without Kareem that one game. I think it was game 6 against Philly. So he showed he could actually play center and dominate.
I mean, Wilt at 6, again, like you said, he needs to be on the list. Him or Shaq. It depends on the eras, I suppose. You can maybe say one is better than the other. I guess I am surprised a little bit that all these people did put Kobe over Magic. I mean, I'm 35, and if I would have done this poll myself or if I would have not seen the results, Chris, I would have assumed that Magic would have been behind Kobe. So maybe this is just a sign of older people voting, or maybe a sign that I missed something, or I don't know. If you would have done this poll, would have you put Magic over
Yeah,
Kobe?
yeah.
Okay,
Because
fair enough.
he's an all-around player. Even more, first of all, he could defend, and so could Kobe. But as far as an all-around, now, as just a sheer scorer, yes, Kobe's better. But the rest of the basketball game, defensively including, he's 6'9", so he can guard, he can guard a bunch of people. He can guard Kobe. I like him up there, yeah. Yep, I do.
And he did actually pass the ball, not to take shots at people, but
Yeah, a lot.
Bill Russell, again, there's that name needs to be up there.
11 out of 13 championships. That's tough to mess around with.
And to wrap it up, you have Kareem, LeBron, Jordan. Obviously, the Jordan-LeBron thing is going to go on forever, maybe if LeBron wins a couple more titles, but I don't think the top three can be debated. I do think if you were a younger kid, a lot of people would have had Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, but I think maybe just that's perception of people missing older generations of time or not being able to see some of these greats. But like all the bigs in this top 10 are all there for a reason, because they were just complete freaks. And again, Shaq at 10 it shows how loaded this top 10 list was. And at least, Chris, I think they got the top 10 right.
Yeah, I think you can maneuver stuff or whatever, but yeah, I think it was a damn good list. And like we said like a month ago or a few weeks ago during the documentary, we do have to let LeBron get these next how many years he's got. Wonder if he gets 3 championships in the next 4 years. Then all of a sudden he's got 6. Then all of a sudden you start to go, maybe he is better, So we're going to find out. He now gets to play, although it's later in his career, of course. But he gets to play with the top 5 player. And I know people are like, D-Wade. D-Wade, the last 2 years, especially in the playoffs, once the season went the whole time, and you and I said this during it, Dwayne Wade was not Dwayne Wade in those 2 seasons. He just wasn't. At times, was he? Did he have great games? Sometimes, yes. But you can't act like he really was the D Wade that's on this list because of injuries. You could see it. You could clearly see he wasn't himself for 2 of those seasons. So I think prime for prime and health-wise, Davis right now is a top 5 player. And there's times you can make an argument he's number 1. So if you give him a top 5 status, then Bron's got that. He can actually let Davis, what he was going to let Kyrie, take over, especially for scoring. And wonder if he wins. I mean, he has to win this first one to get to 2 or 3 in the next 4 years or something like that. Yeah. And, knock on wood, injury and all that. But if he wins this first one and then wins 2 out of the 3, look who he'll be doing it against too. And that's another thing. When you look at LeBron, look at the teams, who he had to go against. And the betting odds, you know what I mean, compared to Jordan and compared to some of the other teams. It's pretty interesting argument. I give Jordan it right now, but LeBron still has some years. Any final words, sir, before you get us out of here?
I'll just say that I would say maybe give it another year or 2, and I think my boy Klay Thompson has got to be on the list just because his 3-point numbers are as good as anyone in history, and his defense is really strong. But I guess he must have been just short. Like, he must have just missed. I mean, this could be complete bias, but if from all we looked at, I think maybe he's just not quite been around quite long enough.
Well, and Curry too helps. If there's no Curry, could Klay do exactly what he's doing? I'm not sure about that.
That's because right. Curry, and they build off each other. You're right.
Because Curry can really get off the dribble since 2014 or whatever, when he just really started high-level dribbling.
They do feed off each other. I guess just from a lot of these elite scorers, or some of the people on this list, they weren't proud, they weren't studs defensively, but that's something he offers. So maybe if they do this again in 5 years, he'll sneak on there. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. But yeah, that was fun to do. And again, if AD wins a ring with LeBron, he'll be creeping down that list too, realistically. So until then, Chris and I will be back, as he said, when the playoffs start. If there is crazy news that does come out, we'll do a pod, but I'm hoping knock on wood, that we will start a podcast when the NBA starts back their brief finish to the regular season. Again, there's 8 games. If you're a gambler on sports, dude, you're set. You get like 5 games a day for like 2 weeks in a row. And
yeah, 16 straight days. 16 straight days. So basically, mid-April is when we'll be back, or mid-August is when we'll be back.
Mid-April. And then you're gonna have a playoff. I mean, it's gonna be so much fun. It's gonna so much fun to watch. So until then, take care of yourself. Stay safe. Don't do something dumb on social media. Use it for a positive, good way in your heart. And
unless
the boys
you're racist, then post all you want.
Yeah, get yourself fired. Go ahead.
Fired.
Go ahead. The boys are out tonight. Peace.